Our next question is, with such a large amount of content/labs that are required to be covered for AP Biology, how do you trim to the specifics while still addressing the big picture and making sure your students are ready for the exam in May?
I got to take this one. I'll start. Do the labs first. Make sure that the labs are the beating heart of your biology, AP Biology course. Let the content flow from the laboratories and the investigations that you do. If you try to make the labs subservient to the content, you won't fit them in, and your students will have a much less interesting experience. They will be less engaged, and they'll be less likely to do their best work for you in May. Period.
I would agree with that. Make the labs the centerpiece. I mean, because again, and I say this all the time, to learn science, you got to do it. You got to do the science. And if the kids aren't doing the science, then there's no opportunity for them to learn content. There's no opportunity for them to apply content. There's no opportunity for them to learn or apply critical thinking skills, analysis skills, none of that. And so, you know, make the labs the centerpiece.
I'll take it a step further, Lee, and I'll say there's no reason for them to learn it other than that they're stuck in class. And if that's the case, then how is our class different than a history class or a non-experiential class? We've got to give our 21st century kids a reason to learn this stuff.
Well, and you have to make it relevant. I mean, and
right.
There's definitely biology is the science I think that the kids have the easiest time relating to, just because it's what they see every day. It's what they live every day. Not that they don't live and breathe chemistry and physics, because I always tell my kids biology is applied chemistry and physics anyway. But, you know, I think out of all the three major science disciplines, biology is the one that the kids are the most comfortable with. They are, you know, this is for a lot of these kids, at least with my students, they've already had a year of biology. So they've got prior exposure, and hopefully they had a good experience, and that's why they're coming back for more. You know?
And I'd like to add, too, that labs are a moot point if you've already covered it in the content. And so,
amen, sister.
And so if you're talking about trying to get it all covered if they're doing beforehand. And they will learn doing the lab. The textbook allows you to give them it's got AP connections and misconceptions and exam lab related tips. So again, you can drive the point home, but they're discovering the information for themselves.
Agreed. And Bobbie, I didn't mean to jump all over you there, but the thing, like, I'm sure you're thinking the same thing. If you tell a student that cell respiration rates are dependent on temperature, and then you tell them to go test the effects of temperature on cell respiration, they'll be like, why? You just told me it was dependent. You just told me it's faster when, you told me it speeds up when the organisms are warmer and slows down when they're colder. Why the hell would I do this? You just told me this. So you got to trick them into doing the stuff and then figuring out why based on the data that they collect.
I agree.
So the next question is, and these are all kind of connected, so if you would like me to skip any, just let me know. But the next question is, my biggest challenge is making sure my labs have enough inquiry and we cover the content, even with some flipped content. What are some solutions you've found? And then I would be interested in some shorter versions of the long labs, for example, artificial selection. I only have 45-minute class periods.
I'm just going to say that if you're looking for shorter versions of the long labs, there are a lot of good resources in the Teacher's Edition. Plus, there are doing science experiments, so to speak, but it's called Doing Science, that teachers wrote they're actually shorter. And I think that sometimes you've got better data analysis in teaching some of those skills by looking at some of the data sets and analysis exercises that are actually in the textbook. It's always going to be a challenge, but again, I think we answered it in the last question. You've just got to change your mindset and start out with the labs. Of course, you've got to give them the baseline so they understand how to run the experiment, but then set them free to test other variables. So I don't think there's a solution. You can't not do labs.
No, I was going to say, you definitely got to do labs. Definitely.
And I also think that, so I was talking about this with Nicole via email today, sort of thinking about the inquiry doesn't always have to happen on the front end. And in my experience, teenagers don't ask very sophisticated questions, especially on the front end when they don't have a lot of knowledge base. So I don't have a problem doing guided inquiry and helping them construct their questions or give them a framework in which to ask pointed questions. To me, the real inquiry is well, why did that happen? And what would happen if? And that only occurs if you spend time with, presenting imagine the kids go through a cell respiration activity or an enzyme catalysis activity, and they've got beautiful data. They've got these beautiful enzyme kinetics curves, but they have no idea why it happened. Throw that data right back up on the board, whether it's drawing it out on a whiteboard or projecting a vernier or a Pasco graph right on the board, or having kids, put their data into a table and then looking for patterns in that table. But once students are engaged in the data that they collect, you can help them uncover the reasons why a particular biological principle occurs, right? So if everybody here can probably imagine an enzyme kinetics curve where the substrate gets used up and you end up with your product formation at equilibrium versus time. We know that, but our kids don't. But they'll understand it better if they're using the data that they collect. So I guess the short story is, think about inquiry in terms of reasons why, and predict what would happen if, after they've had a experience in a relatively controlled environment in the laboratory and they've had some confidence collecting data. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, I was going to say, I would definitely agree with that, because a lot of, that's when they do their most meaningful learning, is when they have an opportunity to look at data that they've collected and then let them talk it out with you or with each other, even better. Because some of the best teaching days I've had in class are days when the kids are looking at their data and they're arguing with each other about, well, no, it happens because of this. Like, we just did a muscle fatigue activity where the kids had to see how many times they could open and shut a binder clip with their dominant and non-dominant hand. And the kids are, I was walking around listening to kids talk about, well, it's going down. Why isn't it going down in this hand? And just the conversations that they were having about the data that they collected, they learned more from that than they would have learned from me talking about it with them. So let them have a chance to talk with each other and hash it out and reason it out.